Expressions can contain values, variables that have already been created, operators, built-in functions, and parentheses. Some of the operators that we use include the plus sign for addition. The dash is used for both negation and subtraction. We use the asterisk or star for multiplication. There are two different division operators. There's the divided by operator, which is a slash. For example, 10 divided by 5 is 2. And there's also the divided into operator, which is the backslash. For example, 5 divided into 10 is also 2. And there's an exponentiation operator, which is the little caret symbol. So for example, 5 squared is 5 raised to the second power, or 25. Some operators have precedence over others. Here's the precedent list from highest to lowest for the operators so far. First of all, if you put anything in parentheses, that's going to have the highest level of precedence. So in other words, that part of the expression would be evaluated first. Exponentiation is the next highest. And then negation, notice that's just negation, not subtraction. And then all of the multiplication and division operators have the same level of precedence. And then finally the lowest level is addition and subtraction. When you have nested parentheses, the expressions in the inner parentheses are always evaluated first. MATLAB has a format command that gives you many options in terms of formatting. For example, you could say format long or format short, and that would give you a different number of decimal places. Format loose versus format compact would give you blank lines in between other lines or not. You can continue long expressions on the next line using what's called the ellipsis, which is 3 dots. So for example, I said 3 plus 55 minus 62 plus 4 minus 5, and then continued the rest of it on the next line, plus 22 minus 1. If you want scientific or exponential notation, you use e for the exponent of 10 raised to a power. So for example, 3e5 means 3 times 10 to the 5th power. There are many, many, many built-in functions in MATLAB. The related functions are grouped together into what are called help topics. If you want to see a list of the help topics, just type help at the prompt in the command window, and that will show you the long list of help topics. For example, you'll see that one of them is called ELFUN, which is short for the elementary math functions. If you want to find the functions in a particular help topic, then you type help in the name of that help topic. For example, help LFUN will show you the functions that are within that particular topic. And then if you want to find out about a particular function, for example the sine function, you could say help sine, and that would show you information about the sine function and also tell you related functions. You can also choose the help button under resources to bring up the documentation page. Let's go through some terminology on using functions. So if you want to use a function, for example one of the built-in functions, what you do is you call the function. To call it, you give the name of the function followed by the argument or arguments that are passed to the function inside of parentheses. Many functions calculate values and return the results. So for example, if you want to find the absolute value of -4, the name of the function is ABS. So you would say ABS parentheses -4. So that's an example of calling the function and passing the argument of -4. The absolute value function is going to take the -4, do whatever it does to figure out what the absolute value of that is, and then it returns that value. In this case, we have just an expression, not an assignment statement, so MATLAB stores the result in the default variable ants. Here are some of the functions that are in the LFUN help topic. There are trig functions, for example sine, cosine, tangent, and those are all in radians. There's also an arcsine function, a sine. There's hyperbolic sine, sine h, etc. There are lots of these functions. For functions that use degrees rather than radians, there's a d at the end of the name. So for example, sine d instead of sine, or cosine d instead of cosine. There are rounding and remainder functions, fix, floor, ceil, and round. There are functions that return remainder, rem and mod. And the sine function returns the sign of an argument. If the argument is positive, it returns +1. If it's 0, it returns 0. And if it's a negative number, it returns -1. So it returns either a -1, 0, or 1. And there are also square root and nth root functions. Additionally, there are some log functions. So there are several built-in functions that return logarithms. The log function, just log, returns the natural logarithm, or base e. Log 2 of x returns the base 2 logarithm, and log 10 returns the base 10, or what's called the common logarithm. MATLAB also has a built-in function exp of n, which returns the constant e raised to the nth power. So note there's no actual constant built in for e, we use the exp function instead. Also, don't confuse this with the exponential notation or scientific notation e.